You have better credit than me, so what's the big deal? Those were the exact words my sister Sarah laughed as she said them, standing in my kitchen 3 months before her wedding, completely unaware that I'd already discovered the $75,000 in credit card debt she'd racked up in my name. My name is Michael Chen. I'm 34 years old, and I work as a forensic accountant for Morrison & Associates in Seattle. At that moment, watching her casually dismiss the financial devastation she'd caused, I knew I wasn't just going to report this to the police. I was going to make sure the timing was absolutely perfect. I didn't explode. I didn't scream. I simply nodded and said, "You're right, Sarah. Family should help family." She beamed at me, completely missing the ice in my voice. What she didn't know was that I'd spent the last 6 weeks meticulously documenting every fraudulent transaction, every forged signature, and every lie she told our parents about her sudden promotion that was funding her dream wedding. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, a man whose entire career was built on following paper trails and uncovering financial crimes, and my own sister had been systematically destroying my credit score for 2 years. 2 years of what I thought was identity theft from some random criminal, when it was family dinner Sarah the whole time, smiling at me across our parents' dinner table. Let me back up and explain how we got here. Sarah and I grew up in a middle-class family in Tacoma. I was the responsible older brother who put myself through college, got my CPA certification, and built a solid career. Sarah was the free spirit who bounced between jobs, relationships, and cities like she was collecting postcards. Our parents always said she'd find her way eventually, but I was the one they called when she needed bail money or rent assistance. The first sign something was wrong came 18 months ago when I applied for a mortgage on a condo in Capitol Hill. The loan officer, Janet Murphy from First National, looked at my application with confusion. "Mr. Chen," she said, "your credit report shows some concerning activity. There are several high-limit credit cards with significant balances that seem inconsistent with your financial profile." My blood pressure spiked immediately. "What kind of cards? I only have 2 credit cards, both paid off monthly." Janet printed out a report that made my hands shake. 7 credit cards I'd never applied for, with a combined limit of $89,000 and balances totaling $74,832. Thus, addresses were all variations of places I'd lived, but the spending patterns were completely unlike my own. Luxury clothing stores, high-end restaurants, an $8,000 payment to something called Celestial Weddings and Events. That night, I did what any forensic accountant would do. I pulled my detailed credit report, requested transaction histories, and began building a timeline. The first fraudulent card was opened 26 months ago, right after our cousin's wedding, where Sarah had been maid of honor. The spending was initially careful, $200 here, $500 there, but had escalated dramatically in recent months. The breakthrough came when I recognized a transaction pattern. Every third Friday, there were cash advances of exactly $800 from an ATM in Bellingham, about 2 hours north of Seattle. Sarah had moved to Bellingham 14 months ago for what she called a fresh start with her fiancé, David Rodriguez. The timing was too perfect to be coincidental. I spent my next weekend in Bellingham driving past the ATM location and documenting everything. The ATM was outside a grocery store in a strip mall where Sarah worked part-time as a yoga instructor. Security footage might be long gone, but the location confirmed my suspicions. I also drove past the address she'd given our parents, a modest apartment complex that didn't match the luxury lifestyle her social media suggested. Sarah's Instagram and Facebook told a different story. Designer. Dresses, expensive dinners, weekend trips to Vancouver, and constant posts about her upcoming dream wedding at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel in Seattle. The venue alone cost $15,000, according to their website. David worked as a server at a local restaurant, so unless he was dealing drugs on the side, there was no way their combined legitimate income could support this lifestyle. The smoking gun came when I decided to visit Sarah unannounced. I told our parents I was driving up to Bellingham for a day trip and would surprise her. When I knocked on her apartment door at 11:30 a.m. on a Saturday, she answered in silk pajamas that I recognized from a Nordstrom charge I'd seen on one of my credit reports. "Michael," she said, clearly flustered, "what are you doing here?" "Thought I'd take my little sister to lunch," I replied calmly. "Nice pajamas. Those look expensive." She laughed nervously. "Oh, these? David got them for me. Come in, but ignore the mess. We're still planning the wedding, and there's paperwork everywhere." The paperwork was spread across her dining table, and my trained eye immediately caught something that made my stomach drop. There were credit card statements with my name on them, but the address was Sarah's apartment, bank routing slips, and a notebook with what looked like practice signatures, my signature written over and over in pencil. While Sarah was in the kitchen making coffee, I discreetly photographed everything with my phone. The evidence was overwhelming. She hadn't just stolen my identity. She'd created an entire mail forwarding system to intercept the statements and bills. The notebook contained different versions of my signature, along with notes about keeping consistent handwriting and remember the way Mike dots his I's. That's when she made her fatal mistake. David came home early from work and immediately started complaining about wedding expenses. The flowers alone are costing us $3,000, he said, not noticing me at first. Thank God your brother has such good credit, or we'd be having this wedding at a pizza place. The room went dead silent. Sarah's face turned white. David realized what he'd said and tried to backtrack, but it was too late. I looked at my sister and asked very calmly, Sarah, is there something you want to tell me? That's when she laughed and said the words I'll never forget. Look, Michael, you have better credit than me, and you make good money. You'll pay it off eventually. What's the big deal? It's not like you're getting married anytime soon. Consider it my wedding gift. I stayed calm. So you've been using my identity to finance your wedding? Our parents always said we should help each other out, she said, her tone becoming defensive. You helped me with rent money before. This is just a bigger loan? Without my knowledge or consent, I replied. David jumped in, clearly coached for this conversation. We'll pay you back over time. We just needed to get through the wedding. Sarah's going to start making real money as a yoga instructor, and I'm up for a promotion. I pretended to consider this. How much are we talking about total? Sarah relaxed, thinking she'd convinced me. It's not that much, maybe $60,000, and that includes the honeymoon to Hawaii. You'll love the pictures. She was lying even then. I knew the real number was $75,000 and climbing. When exactly were you planning to tell me about this? After the wedding, she said. We didn't want to stress you out beforehand. I nodded slowly. I see. When is the wedding again? October 14th, at the Fairmont Olympic. You're still coming, right? You're walking me down the aisle since Dad's back is acting up. Wouldn't miss it for the world, I said. That afternoon, I drove back to Seattle and began phase 2 of my investigation. As a forensic accountant, I knew exactly how to build an airtight case for identity theft and fraud. I contacted each credit card company and filed formal disputes. I requested all application documents which would show the forged signatures. I contacted the Postal Service about the mail forwarding scheme. Most importantly, I called my friend Detective Lisa Park with the Seattle Police Department's white-collar crime unit. Michael, this is pretty straightforward identity theft, Lisa said after reviewing my evidence. The problem is, it's family. Are you sure you want to press charges? Lisa, she stole $75,000 from me and destroyed my credit rating. If this were a stranger, would you hesitate? No, but then treat it like any other crime. I want her arrested, but I want the timing to be strategic. Lisa understood. We'd worked together on several complex fraud cases, and she knew I didn't make requests lightly. What did you have in mind? Her wedding is October 14th at the Fairmont Olympic. She's invited 200 people, including our entire extended family, her fiance's family, and all their friends. She's planning to humiliate me by having me walk her down the aisle while knowing she's been stealing from me. I want her arrested at the reception. That's pretty harsh, Michael. You know what's harsh? Finding out your sister has been systematically destroying your financial life while planning a wedding with your money and then laughing about it? She had 2 years to come clean. She had today to confess and work out a payment plan. Instead, she lied to my face and expected me to subsidize her fairy tale. Lisa agreed to coordinate with the hotel security and have officers standing by, but I wasn't done yet. My next call was to David's employer, Coastal Bistro in Bellingham. I spoke with the manager, explained that I was investigating financial fraud, and discovered that David had been bragging to coworkers about his loaded future brother-in-law, who was helping out with wedding expenses. The manager, Jennifer Walsh, was horrified to learn the truth and agreed to cooperate fully with any investigation. Then I called the Fairmont Olympic Hotel. I spoke with their events coordinator, Patricia Williams, and explained the situation. The hotel had a policy about events paid for with fraudulent funds, and Patricia was very concerned about their liability. After consulting with their legal team, they agreed to freeze the payment arrangements and cooperate with law enforcement. The beauty of being a forensic accountant is that you understand exactly how money flows and where vulnerabilities exist. Sarah had paid for the wedding with cash advances and direct payments from the fraudulent credit cards. Every transaction was documented, traceable, and clearly illegal. She'd created a paper trail that any first-year law student could follow. October 14th arrived faster than I expected, the morning of the Americo wedding. I received a call from Detective Park. We've got the warrant, Michael. Are you absolutely sure you want to do this? Has anything about the case changed? Is she any less guilty? No, but then we proceed as planned. The wedding ceremony itself was beautiful, I have to admit. The Fairmont Olympic had done an incredible job with the decorations, $4,200 worth of flowers according to my credit card statement. Sarah looked radiant in a $3,800 designer dress that I'd unknowingly purchased. David seemed genuinely happy. which almost made me feel bad for him. Almost. I walked Sarah down the aisle as planned, and she whispered, "Thank you for being so understanding about everything, Michael. I knew you'd come around." I squeezed her arm gently and whispered back, "I'm full of surprises, Sarah." The ceremony went off without a hitch. They exchanged vows, kissed, and everyone cheered. Our parents were crying happy tears. David's family was beaming. For 20 minutes, it was a perfect wedding funded by identity theft. The reception started at 7 p.m. in the hotel's Olympic ballroom. The cocktail hour featured premium alcohol, charged to my Amex without my knowledge. The dinner was a 4-course plated meal that cost $180 per person for 200 guests. Sarah had spared no expense with my money. I waded through the cocktails, the introductions, and the first course. Sarah was glowing, making rounds to thank everyone for coming, showing off her $2,400 wedding ring set, also courtesy of my credit. David was telling anyone who would listen about their planned honeymoon to Maui, 7 days at the Grand Wiley Resort, charged to a card in my name just 3 days earlier. At 9:15 p.m., right after the salad course but before the main entree, I nodded to Detective Park, who was waiting near the service entrance with 2 uniformed officers. Sarah was at the head table, laughing at something David's best man had just said when Detective Park approached with the arrest warrant. "Sarah Chen Rodriguez," Detective Park said clearly, her voice cutting through the dinner conversation. "You're under arrest for identity theft, credit card fraud, and wire fraud." The reaction was immediate and devastating. Sarah's wine glass shattered on the floor. David jumped up, knocking his chair backward. The conversations at nearby tables stopped like someone had flipped a switch. "What?" Sarah screamed. "This is a mistake. This is my wedding." "You have the right to remain silent," Detective Park continued, pulling out handcuffs. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." "Michael," Sarah looked at me desperately, "tell them this is a mistake." I stood up slowly and addressed the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry to interrupt this beautiful celebration, but I need you all to know something. This wedding, this entire event, was paid for with credit cards opened fraudulently in my name. My sister has stolen $75,000 from me over the past 2 years to fund her lifestyle and this wedding. I only discovered the truth 3 months ago." The room erupted. David's family was shouting questions. Our parents looked mortified. Sarah was screaming denials while being handcuffed. "The hotel has been fully cooperative," I continued, "and they'll be refunding any costs associated with tonight's event. I apologize to all of you for the deception, but I wanted you to understand that Sarah made these choices herself." "You vindictive bastard," Sarah screamed as the officers began leading her away. "You couldn't stand seeing me happy." "I would have been thrilled to see you happy, Sarah," I replied calmly. "I would have even helped pay for a wedding you could actually afford, but you chose to steal from me instead of asking for help." David was in complete shock. "Sarah, is this true? Did you really steal from your brother?" Sarah's mask finally slipped completely. "It wasn't stealing. He has plenty of money. This was supposed to be my special day." "With someone else's money," Detective Park added, guiding Sarah toward the exit. The last thing Sarah said before being let out was, "You'll never see a dime of it back, Michael. I hope you're happy." The irony was perfect. She was still concerned about money even while being arrested for stealing it. David annulled the marriage the next morning. When I saw him at the courthouse, he looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. "Michael, I swear I didn't know the extent of what she was doing," he said. "She told me you were helping with wedding expenses because you wanted her to be happy." "David, I believe you," I replied. "But you knew something wasn't right. You made comments about my credit, about money Sarah shouldn't have had." He nodded miserably. "I thought maybe she was exaggerating your generosity, but I didn't want to look too closely, because I wanted the wedding she dreamed of. I'm sorry. The person you should be sorry for is yourself. You dodged a bullet." 3 weeks later, I found out just how right I was. During the investigation, Detective Park discovered that Sarah hadn't just stolen from me. She'd opened credit cards in David's name too, $12,000 worth that he knew nothing about. She'd also taken cash advances on cards I didn't even know existed, bringing the total fraud to $89,000. But the story gets better. Remember the yoga studio where Sarah worked? It turns out she'd been teaching classes and collecting payment in cash without reporting it to the studio owner or the IRS. The owner, Margaret Kim, had been wondering why her most popular instructor's classes never seemed to generate the expected revenue. When the fraud case became public, Margaret realized Sarah had been pocketing about $800 per week in unreported income for over a year. The icing on the cake came from an unexpected source, David's cousin Maria, who worked for the IRS. At the courthouse, she mentioned to David that Sarah's sudden wealth should have triggered some tax questions. This led to an audit that revealed Sarah hadn't filed tax returns in 3 years, despite having unreported income from both her cash yoga classes and her credit card fraud. Sarah pled guilty to avoid a lengthy trial. But the sentence was still substantial: 18 months in federal prison, 5 years of supervised probation, and full restitution of $89,000 plus interest and penalties. The tax evasion added another $23,000 to her debt. The most satisfying moment came 6 months after her arrest. Sarah's public defender called me to discuss a plea agreement. Ms. Rodriguez, she's back to her maiden name, wants to know if you'd consider a reduced restitution amount in exchange for her cooperation in other fraud cases. What kind of cooperation? I asked. She apparently learned techniques for identity theft and credit manipulation from other people. The FBI is interested in her information. I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. No deal. She made her choices, and now she can live with the consequences. If she wants to cooperate with federal investigators, that's her business, but it doesn't reduce what she owes me. Here's what I recovered. The hotel refunded $28,000 in wedding expenses after insurance covered their losses. Sarah's engagement ring, wedding dress, and other luxury items were seized and sold, generating another $8,200. The fraudulent credit card companies wrote off their losses and removed all negative information from my credit report. Most importantly, my credit score not only recovered, but actually improved because of the detailed documentation I'd provided. Janet Murphy from First National called me personally to apologize for the initial mortgage denial and offered me a loan at their best available rate. A year later, I bought a beautiful condo in Capitol Hill with a view of Elliott Bay. I could afford the payments easily without the burden of Sarah's fraudulent debt dragging down my credit score. David ended up being a valuable witness in Sarah's case. He provided text messages where Sarah had explicitly discussed using my identity for financial gain. In one particularly damning message, she'd written, "Don't worry about the money. My brother's too trusting and makes too much to notice a few extras." Charges. Besides, family helps family, right? The psychological evaluation ordered by the court revealed something I'd suspected but never wanted to admit. Sarah showed classic signs of narcissistic personality disorder and financial addiction. The psychologist, Dr. Amanda Foster, explained that Sarah genuinely believed she was entitled to anything she wanted, and that other people existed primarily to fulfill her needs. "Your sister doesn't understand why you're angry," Dr. Foster's told me during a victim impact meeting. "In her mind, you should be happy to provide for her wedding because that's what good brothers do. She can't comprehend that stealing is different from asking for help." This actually made me feel better about my decision to have her arrested at the wedding. Sarah had never planned to pay me back or even acknowledge the debt. She viewed my money as her money, just held in a different account. The wedding guests' reactions were mixed, but mostly supportive once they understood the full situation. Our parents were devastated, but ultimately stood by my decision. My mother said something I'll never forget. "I raised you to be responsible and her to be independent. I never imagined she'd use that independence to hurt you." David's family was actually grateful. His mother, Rosa Rodriguez, called to thank me for exposing Sarah's character before the marriage was legally finalized. "She would have destroyed David's credit and finances, too," Rosa said. "You saved my son from years of financial abuse." The most unexpected support came from Sarah's former friends. As news of the arrest spread, 3 different women contacted me with similar stories. Sarah had been borrowing money, stealing small items, and manipulating people for years. One friend, Jessica Martinez, had lent Sarah $2,000 for a family emergency that never existed. "She's been running small scams for as long as I've known her," Jessica told me. But we all thought it was just Sarah being Sarah, a little selfish, a little dramatic. We never realized she was capable of serious fraud. These revelations helped convince the prosecutor to seek the maximum sentence. Sarah wasn't a desperate person who'd made a single bad choice. She was a serial financial predator who'd been escalating her crimes for years. 2 years after the arrest, I received a letter from Sarah in federal prison. She'd found my address somehow and wanted to explain her side of things. The letter was 8 pages of justifications, excuses, and barely concealed anger. She blamed our parents for not teaching her better financial skills. She blamed David for wanting an expensive wedding. She blamed the credit card companies for making fraud too easy. The only thing she didn't do was accept responsibility for her choices. The final paragraph perfectly captured Sarah's mindset. "I know you think you won, Michael, but you destroyed our relationship over money. Money can be replaced, but family can't. I hope you think it was worth it when you're old and alone." I never replied to the letter, but I did think about her words. Was it worth it? Absolutely. Sarah didn't just steal my money. She stole 2 years of financial stability, prevented me from buying a home when I wanted to, and damaged my relationship with our parents, who had to choose sides. More than that, she looked me in the eye and lied repeatedly, even after being caught. But the real answer is simpler. Sarah made her choices, and I made mine. She chose to steal. I chose justice. 3 years after the wedding arrest, I'm living in my dream condo, debt-free, with excellent credit and a healthy savings account. Sarah is struggling to rebuild her life after prison, banned from most financial services, and working part-time jobs that don't require background checks. David moved back to California, finished his degree, and now works as a high school teacher. He sent me a Christmas card last year thanking me again for showing him who Sarah really was before it was too late. He's engaged to someone else now, a fellow teacher who, according to mutual friends, is kind, honest, and manages her money responsibly. The wedding cake never was cut that night. The hotel donated it to a local homeless shelter the next day. Somehow, that feels like the perfect metaphor. Sarah's stolen dreams feeding people who actually needed help. Instead of celebrating a marriage built on lies and theft, people sometimes ask if I feel bad about the timing of the arrest. Why at the wedding? Why not privately? The answer is that Sarah had 2 years to come clean voluntarily. She had dozens of opportunities to ask for help instead of stealing. Even when caught red-handed in her apartment, she showed no remorse, only entitlement and manipulation. The public nature of her arrest served a purpose beyond just revenge. It exposed her, a pattern of manipulation to everyone who knew her, protecting them from future scams. It demonstrated to any other potential fraudsters in our family or social circle that financial crimes have serious consequences, and it gave me back my dignity after 2 years of being victimized in secret. Most importantly, it established the truth. Sarah had spent months telling people that I was helping with wedding expenses, positioning herself as blessed with a generous brother rather than admitting to theft. The arrest made sure everyone understood exactly how that help had been obtained. Justice isn't just about punishment, it's about truth. And sometimes, for truth to matter, it has to be revealed in the light, not hidden in the shadows. Sarah made her bed with stolen sheets, and I simply made sure she had to lie in it. That's the thing about being a forensic accountant. You learn that numbers don't lie, even when people do. Every transaction tells a story, and Sarah's story was one of calculated deception and escalating greed. My story became one of patience, investigation, and strategic justice. In the end, we both got exactly what we deserved.